The former SDLP Agriculture Minister Brid Rogers has told this programme that she believes her party should leave the executive because it's not doing enough to bring people together. She says the SDLP should become part of the opposition. Her comments come as a Westminster committee has begun to examine how an official opposition could work here. Our political reporter Stephen Walker has more.
The question now is for him. Has he got a clue what he'd do?
Mr. Speaker, he's had the clues in the title. Prime Minister's questions. He's supposed to be answering the questions. Now.
It's a weekly affair, often generating more heat than light, but at least Prime Minister's questions gives the voters an indication of what parliamentary politics is like. The government defends its position whilst the opposition seeks to challenge it. The dividing lines are clear and there are essentially two narratives, one from the government and one from the opposition. So is it time that Stormont followed suit?
This week the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee came to Stormont to examine that very issue of opposition.
What we have here is a blot on the democratic landscape. You expect in North Korea, but not in Northern Ireland, that you will be banned from having an opposition. And I think it's a shameful indictment of these institutions that they're so ordered.
The creation of an official opposition at Stormont would require legislation. The government in London are examining the political structures here, but say the idea of an opposition isn't on the agenda because there is no political consensus. A position that cuts little ice with campaigners for change.
An opposition, isn't about wrecking Stormont, it isn't about bringing down the institution, about having a viable, credible alternative and a structure that holds the government to account.
The UUP and the SDLP insist they can hold the two bigger parties, Sinn Féin and the DUP, to account by staying in the executive, but it's clear a debate is going on behind the scenes. As Agriculture Minister, Brid Rogers sat round the executive table. Contrary to party policy, she thinks the SDLP's sole minister, Alex Attwood, should now leave the executive.
He's doing a very good job, but I do believe that the SDLP should begin to think about pulling out of the executive, particularly since the executive has not moved on the cohesion and integration policy at all. They have neither a policy nor a strategy for bringing the people together.
So you think the SDLP should come out?
I do believe that, because I don't believe the executive are fulfilling the function they were meant to fulfil, which was to bring the people of Northern Ireland together, to have a policy for that and a strategy for that, and they have neither. And I think for one minister in there to turn that around is simply impossible.
So you think the party should pull out?
I think we should go. I think we would be better to be in real opposition. I know it wouldn't be an official opposition, but it would be an opposition which would give us the freedom to become, in a sense, a real opposition.
The First Minister, Peter Robinson, favours the creation of an opposition, but he says there is already an unofficial one in place.
We have a very strong opposition. We have a well-informed opposition. The difficulty is that they're within the executive because the two smaller parties have tended to act as if they were an opposition. So we have ministers in opposition as part of our system.
The DUP and the UUP favour the creation of an opposition, as do the Alliance Party. The SDLP and Sinn Féin have concerns and insist that the principles of the Good Friday Agreement are protected. But could greater scrutiny be achieved without diluting the concept of power sharing?
What you can do is look at the issue of opposition in Stormont in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start looking at either the Good Friday Agreement or the St Andrews Agreement today. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
So rather than adopting the full Westminster model of opposition, could other practices that are used in London be implemented at Stormont?
In the Public Accounts Committee, the chair of that committee is always taken up by the leader of the opposition or the main opposition party. That might be one thing to look at, that I know it would break with DeHunt and with the way that the chairs of the different select committees are allocated at the minute, but one thing to do might be to think about opposition in that broader sense, and to use a committee like the Public Accounts Committee to allow one of those smaller parties to take on an influential role there.
Such a change is unlikely to satisfy those calling for the creation of a full opposition. Basil McRae and John McAllister have made that a centrepiece of their new party, and there is talk of a private members' bill. But change can only come if there is a consensus, and at Stormont, that is in short supply.